Imagine stepping back in time to the 1700s, when Lisbon, Portugal's proud capital, was the epicenter of global power and prosperity. It was a city like no other, a place where wealth flowed from across the seas, a cultural and economic hub where Europe, Africa, and the Americas intersected. Before cities like London or Paris claimed their dominance on the world stage, Lisbon was already thriving as one of the most important centers of trade, science, and culture. At the dawn of the 18th century, Lisbon was a city of extreme contrasts. On one hand, it was a beacon of wealth, where spices, silks, and gold from Brazil filled the streets. The Tagus River glistened with the sails of ships bringing exotic goods from the east, and the city's architecture was a masterpiece of Baroque splendor. On the other hand, Lisbon was still a labyrinth of medieval streets, with narrow alleys and unsanitary living conditions for many of its residents. Lisbon was, at its heart, a city of contradictions, where opulence existed side by side with poverty, where modernity and medieval traditions clashed in every corner of the city. But this golden age was not to last. A devastating tragedy was on the horizon, one that would not only destroy Lisbon, but shake Europe's very foundations. The city at the height of its glory. By the early 1700s, Lisbon was home to nearly 200,000 people, making it the fourth largest city in Europe, behind only London, Paris, and Naples. It was a bustling metropolis at the crossroads of the world, filled with trade, culture, and intellectual activity. Ships from across the globe arrived daily, unloading valuable goods from India, China, and Brazil, bringing spices, textiles, precious metals, and porcelain to the Portuguese capital. Lisbon's wealth was built on these global trade routes, making it one of the richest cities in Europe. At the same time, Lisbon had a deeply religious identity. The city boasted more than 40 churches and 90 convents, earning it the nickname the New Rome. The Baroque architecture that dominated the city's skyline was a testament to the power and glory of the Catholic Church, with intricate designs that represented both the wealth of the church and its spiritual dominance over the people. The Tagus River, the lifeblood of Lisbon, was a hub for international trade, connecting the city to the farthest reaches of the Portuguese Empire. Ships docked at the river's banks, unloading valuable goods and helping the city flourish. For centuries, Lisbon was the jewel of the Atlantic, the crown of the Portuguese Empire. However, beneath the grandeur of Lisbon's outward appearance, the city was also a place of severe inequalities. While the elite enjoyed lavish lives in grand palaces and churches, the working class lived in cramped, unsanitary conditions in the narrow streets of Alfama and Bairro Alto. The city's medieval infrastructure had not kept pace with its growing population. The lack of modern sanitation and the overcrowded conditions made Lisbon vulnerable to disease outbreaks and other public health crises. The 5 pillars of Portuguese power. What made Lisbon so powerful and influential in the 1700s? The answer lies in 5 key pillars of Portuguese supremacy that made Lisbon the heart of a global empire. 1. Connection to the spice trade. Portugal's trade routes extended far into the east, with Goa and Malacca as vital stops in the Portuguese Empire's access to spices, silk, and other valuable goods. The spice trade was a key pillar of Lisbon's wealth, and the city was one of the main points of distribution for these highly sought-after products. 2. Porcelain and silk. Through the Portuguese trading post in Macau, Lisbon had almost a monopoly on Chinese porcelain and silk, luxury items highly coveted by the European elite. These goods were sold at a premium in the markets of Lisbon, further boosting the city's wealth and influence. 3. African trade. Portugal controlled key ports in Angola and Mozambique, which facilitated the transatlantic slave trade and the exchange of gold, ivory, and rare woods. These valuable resources flowed into Lisbon, helping it maintain its economic dominance in Europe. 4. Brazilian gold. Perhaps the most significant pillar of Lisbon's wealth in the 1700s was the discovery of gold in Brazil. In 1695, massive gold deposits were discovered in the interior of Brazil, and this gold rush flooded Lisbon with riches. By the 1730s, Lisbon was receiving thousands of tons of gold each year, making it one of the wealthiest cities in Europe. 5. Scientific and cultural prestige. Lisbon wasn't just a trading hub, it was also a center of intellectual and scientific activity. The wealth brought in by global trade allowed the Portuguese crown to commission important cultural and scientific works. The city became home to a number of scientific institutions, libraries, and observatories, with scholars and intellectuals drawn from across Europe. These pillars combined to make Lisbon one of the most influential cities in the world, a place of wealth, power, and culture. But in 1755, all of this would come crashing down in one of the most devastating events in European history. The catastrophe, the earthquake of 1755. On the morning of November 1st, 1755, Lisbon was jolted by one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded in European history. The tremors were felt across Portugal, Spain, and Morocco, but it was Lisbon that bore the brunt of the devastation. In a matter of minutes, the city was reduced to rubble. The earthquake was followed by a massive tsunami, which struck the Tagus River and flooded the city. As if this devastation wasn't enough, fires broke out in the aftermath, engulfing the already damaged buildings and spreading throughout the city. Thousands of people died in the earthquake, tsunami, and fires, and the city itself was left in ruins. The human toll was staggering. It is estimated that between 30,000 to 60,000 people perished in the disaster, and 85% of Lisbon's buildings were destroyed. The city's palaces, churches, and cultural landmarks were completely wiped out. The Ribeira Palace, the heart of the city's power, was destroyed, and with it, much of the royal administration. Lisbon's position as the center of the global economy was shattered. Its role as the cultural and intellectual heart of Europe also came to an abrupt end, as scholars, writers, and artists were killed or scattered. The intellectual and artistic legacy of Lisbon was crushed under the weight of the tragedy. The resilience of Lisbon, rebuilding from the ashes. Despite the overwhelming destruction, Lisbon's story did not end with the earthquake. The city began the long and difficult process of rebuilding, guided by the leadership of Marquis of Pombal, who was appointed as the Prime Minister shortly after the disaster. Pombal was determined to rebuild Lisbon in a way that would not only restore it, but transform it into a modern city. Pombal implemented a radical urban plan that would later influence the design of other cities around the world. He introduced new building codes, requiring that new structures be built with earthquake-resistant techniques. The streets were redesigned to be wider, allowing for better air circulation and easier access for firefighting efforts. The Baixa Pombalina, the downtown district, was created as the new heart of the city, featuring neoclassical architecture, grid-like streets, and public squares. Pombal's vision was to transform Lisbon from a medieval city into a modern metropolis that could stand as a symbol of Portugal's resilience and forward-thinking leadership. His efforts laid the foundation for Lisbon to rise from the ruins and become a global hub once again, albeit in a new form. The reconstruction of Lisbon, a new era of growth and modernization. The vision of the Marquis of Pombal. After the catastrophic destruction of Lisbon in 1755, the task of rebuilding the city fell squarely on the shoulders of Sebastião José de Carvalho e Melo, known as the Marquis of Pombal. Appointed as the chief minister by King Joseph I, Pombal was tasked with overseeing the reconstruction of Lisbon, a city that had been reduced to rubble. His vision was not just about rebuilding the city, but transforming it into a model of modernization and efficiency. The immediate goal was to make Lisbon safer from future natural disasters, particularly earthquakes, which had nearly destroyed the city. Pombal instituted new building codes that emphasized earthquake-resistant construction. He required that buildings be made of stone and brick rather than wood, with iron and concrete reinforcements to ensure the structures could withstand seismic activity. These measures, although new at the time, would lay the foundation for seismic-resistant architecture used in cities around the world today. Pombal also set out to modernize Lisbon's infrastructure. Streets were redesigned to be wider to facilitate firefighting and ensure better circulation of air, reducing the risk of disease. Public squares were created, providing open spaces for social interaction and commerce. The Baixa Pombalina, the new district, became the heart of Lisbon's reconstruction. With its grid layout and neoclassical architecture, the Baixa represented Pombal's vision of a rationally organized city, designed to meet the needs of a growing population and the demands of modern life. Economic resurgence, from devastation to revival. The rebuilding efforts were not just focused on architecture and infrastructure. Pombal also aimed to revitalize Lisbon's economy. The earthquake had crippled the city's vital port trade and led to a staggering loss of wealth. Pombal realized that rebuilding Lisbon would require more than just physical labor. It would take a strategic economic recovery plan. The Marquis of Pombal focused on revitalizing the city's key industries, especially its trade networks. He worked tirelessly to rebuild Lisbon's role as a major port in the Atlantic trade, particularly in the spice, wine, and gold trades. His efforts to restore Lisbon's commercial activities led to improved relationships with Brazil, which was a Portuguese colony at the time. The Brazilian gold and sugar trade once again became an important source of revenue for Lisbon and the rest of Portugal. Pombal also reformed the tax system, streamlining it to make it more efficient and less reliant on the old, feudal methods that had slowed progress. He took steps to encourage foreign investment by offering incentives to international merchants and business people to invest in the city's reconstruction. Under his leadership, Lisbon began to recover economically, and by the end of the 18th century, the city was once again flourishing as a major trading hub in Europe. Political reforms and control. Pombal's authoritarian approach. While the rebuilding of Lisbon under Pombal was seen as an act of political and economic genius by many, his authoritarian approach to governance led to mixed reactions. Pombal was a man of action, quick, decisive, and often ruthless in his methods. He believed that Portugal, and particularly Lisbon, needed strong, centralized control in order to ensure stability and growth. One of the most controversial actions Pombal took was his crackdown on the Jesuit order. In 1759, he expelled the Jesuits from Portugal, accusing them of conspiring against the state. The Jesuits, a powerful religious order with substantial political influence, had long been a significant force in Portuguese society particularly in matters of education and missionary work in the colonies. However, Pombal viewed their power as a threat to the authority of the state, and he used the earthquake as an opportunity to weaken the Jesuit influence. In addition to his actions against the church, Pombal implemented several reforms that targeted the nobility and the aristocracy. He reduced their privileges and aimed to create a more meritocratic society. His policies were focused on building a strong central government, which he believed was necessary to prevent the kinds of political instability that had plagued Portugal in the past. While his efforts were largely successful in terms of rebuilding Lisbon, his authoritarian methods alienated many of the traditional power structures in the country. The birth of modern Lisbon, a cultural renaissance. As Lisbon rebuilt itself, both physically and economically, it also became a center of cultural and intellectual activity. The 18th century marked a renaissance of sorts for Lisbon, as it became a hub for scientific innovation, artistic expression, and philosophical debate. Under Pombal's rule, Portugal embraced Enlightenment ideas, which emphasized reason, scientific inquiry, and individual rights. Lisbon, like other European capitals, became a place where these new ideas could be debated and explored. The Royal Academy of Sciences, established in 1779, became a leading institution for scientific thought and discovery. Scientists in Lisbon studied astronomy, medicine, and geography, contributing to the intellectual development of Europe during the Age of Enlightenment. Culturally, Lisbon began to embrace Baroque and neoclassical styles in its architecture, art, and music. Artists like Vieira Lusitano and Franz Post were commissioned to decorate the newly rebuilt buildings and churches. The Royal Theatre of São Carlos, built in 1793, became the center of Lisbon's opera and theatre scene, attracting artists from across Europe. Lisbon's cultural life was thriving once again, bringing the city back to prominence as a cultural hub of the continent. Lisbon's continued role as a global hub. By the end of the 18th century, Lisbon had fully recovered from the devastating earthquake of 1755 and had reasserted its position as one of Europe's leading cities. The city had evolved from a medieval port town into a modern metropolis with a complex infrastructure and a vibrant economy. Lisbon's role as a center of trade, finance, and culture was re-established, and its influence continued to extend across Europe, South America, and Africa. Lisbon's economic resurgence and cultural rebirth set the stage for the 19th century, when it would become a key player in the global imperial and colonial systems. The wealth generated by trade, particularly in Brazilian sugar, gold, and coffee, continued to flow into Lisbon, and the city maintained its position as an important commercial hub well into the next century. The earthquake's lasting legacy. A city of resilience. The recovery of Lisbon after the earthquake of 1755 is a testament to the resilience of the city and its people. The earthquake, followed by a tsunami and fires, could have marked the end of the city as a global center. Instead, under the leadership of the Marquis of Pombal, Lisbon emerged stronger than before. Through radical reforms, innovative architecture, and an unwavering commitment to recovery, Lisbon reinvented itself. The legacy of the rebuilding effort is still visible today in the Baixa Pombalina, Lisbon's downtown area, which remains a symbol of the city's resilience and modernity. The Baroque and neoclassical architecture of the district is a reminder of Lisbon's golden age, and its wide boulevards and open spaces reflect the urban planning vision of Pombal. The city he rebuilt remains a proud example of how a metropolis can rise from the ashes of disaster and evolve into a thriving global city once again. Lisbon in the 1700s. Enduring legacy and global influence. The influence of Lisbon on the Portuguese Empire. In the wake of the 1755 earthquake, Lisbon not only rebuilt itself, but also emerged as a key center in the Portuguese Empire, which continued to expand its influence, particularly in Brazil, Africa, and Asia. Lisbon remained a critical hub for trade, and its role as a global port city was more significant than ever. During the 18th century, Brazil was the crown jewel of the Portuguese Empire. The discovery of gold and diamonds in Minas Gerais in the late 17th century had solidified Brazil's importance to Lisbon. By the 1700s, Brazilian gold was flowing into Lisbon, and the city became one of the wealthiest in Europe due to its control of this lucrative trade. The Portuguese Empire in Africa was also flourishing during this period, with key ports like Luanda and Mozambique serving as vital points for the transatlantic slave trade and the exchange of goods like ivory, gold, and spices. Lisbon acted as the linchpin of these networks, connecting Africa, the Americas, and Asia through its global maritime routes. However, the growing reliance on Brazil and the colonial wealth it provided came at a price. With Brazil dominating trade, Lisbon's economic dependence on its colonies was deepening. As we will see in the next century, this would lead to major political upheaval and the eventual downfall of Portugal's imperial dominance. Lisbon's cultural impact, a city of intellectual and artistic excellence. Lisbon in the 1700s wasn't just a hub for trade and political power, it was also a city of intellectual and artistic growth. As Portugal continued to recover from the destruction of the 1755 earthquake, the city became home to a flourishing cultural and scientific scene that was deeply influenced by the ideas of the Enlightenment. The Marquis of Pombal, despite his authoritarian rule, promoted intellectual and scientific progress in Lisbon. He founded the Royal Academy of Sciences in 1779, which became one of the leading scientific institutions in Europe. This institution, along with others in Lisbon, contributed to the advancement of knowledge in fields like astronomy, geography, and medicine. Culturally, Lisbon embraced the Baroque and later neoclassical styles of architecture and art. The city's public squares, churches, and palaces were adorned with the intricate designs of Baroque artists who had been commissioned to decorate the city as part of the reconstruction efforts. This artistic revival not only revitalized the city's cultural identity, but also made Lisbon a place where the fusion of European artistic trends and Portuguese flair came to define the architecture of the time. Lisbon's role in the global Enlightenment. The Enlightenment, the intellectual movement that emphasized reason, individual rights, and progress, had a significant impact on Lisbon. Although Portugal lagged behind other European nations in embracing the full scope of Enlightenment ideals, Lisbon played a central role in disseminating new ideas. Lisbon's cultural and intellectual life in the 18th century became a crossroads for philosophers, scientists, and thinkers from across Europe. The Royal Academy of Sciences fostered an environment where new ideas about reason, liberty, and progress could be debated and developed. The influence of French and English Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire, Rousseau, and John Locke found their way into Portuguese intellectual circles. Lisbon became an important place for the discussion of scientific rationalism and liberal thought, contributing to the growing movement for political reform across Europe. Although the full scale of the Enlightenment's social and political changes didn't manifest in Portugal until later, Lisbon was undoubtedly a cultural capital for the exchange of ideas that would later inspire the revolutionary movements of the 19th century. Lisbon in the 19th century, from glory to revolution. While Lisbon flourished in the 1700s, the 19th century brought significant challenges that would shape the city's future. In 1807, the Napoleonic Wars and the French invasion of Portugal would disrupt Lisbon's political and economic stability. The Portuguese royal family fled to Brazil, and Lisbon became a battleground for control of the country. In the early part of the century, the Portuguese Empire began to decline as Brazil gained independence in 1822, and the Portuguese colonies in Africa and Asia grew increasingly unstable. By the mid-1800s, Lisbon was no longer the bustling imperial capital it once had been. The rise of industrialization in other European cities left Lisbon behind, and its influence began to wane. But Lisbon's legacy as a center of culture and intellectual exchange continued to influence the city throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. It remained an important cultural hub where European and global ideas converged, laying the groundwork for Portugal's modern era. Lisbon's cultural identity, a city of resilience. Lisbon's 18th century history is one of resilience, from the destruction of the earthquake in 1755 to the rise of a new, modern city. Despite the political upheavals, economic challenges, and cultural transitions of the 19th and 20th centuries, Lisbon remained an important place for the arts, science, and culture. The city became synonymous with the spirit of survival, constantly rebuilding, reimagining, and renewing itself, much like the resilient nature of the people who called it home. Its vibrant intellectual and artistic communities left a profound mark on the development of European thought and culture. The legacy of 18th century Lisbon. Today, as we walk through the streets of modern-day Lisbon, we can still see the influence of its 18th century glory. The Baixa Pombalina, with its grand squares and neoclassical buildings, serves as a reminder of the resilience and vision of the Marquis of Pombal, who rebuilt the city after the devastating earthquake. The city's deep-rooted history in trade, culture, and intellectual pursuits continues to inspire the way Lisbon engages with the world. Lisbon's role as a global crossroads, a meeting point for cultures, ideas, and trade, helped shape the modern identity of the city. It's a city that reflects both its past and its future, with a spirit of resilience that lives on in its bustling streets, its vibrant cultural life, and its connection to the world. As we look at Lisbon today, we see the city not just as a place of the past, but as a city that continues to evolve, growing with the times while staying true to the legacy of wealth, culture, and resilience that was established during its golden age in the 1700s.